Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Little Brown, and I'll be doing this session today. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope to give you some new information, maybe some new ideas in the next 45 minutes, and hopefully some, real practical ideas about what to do after you have an approved prospectus. That's the topic of this presentation. What are the next steps for your document once you get that prospectus approval? And today, again, I will be presenting this session. I've been with Walden for 9 years now as a Foreman style editor. I'm also the coordinator of templates and formatting resources, which is really the focus of our next section, although we'll be next session, sorry, which I'm also presenting, although we'll also be talking about the template a little bit in this presentation too, which is my favorite area and my focus as a coordinator in our department. I'm also joined by Denise Long, who's facilitating this session and is really responsible for putting together this whole event, and I think has done a really nice job. So she'll be in the background answering questions in the chat, and I've let her know that if there's anything that I need to address as we go along, I may not necessarily see the chat box because I'm going to be going between screens to show you some resources and so on that you can use using multiple windows. So if there's anything I need to back up and repeat or clarify for any reason, Denise is welcome to break in and let me know. And certainly put anything into the chat that you'd like to know, although we will be stopping for a larger Q&A at the end, time permitting. So just a quick overview of the content of this session. We're going to talk about, again, what to do after you have that approved prospectus document and how to begin the writing process, because I think that can be sometimes a confusing and difficult step to really get that going, to really get the proposal started in a way that is helpful and directed. And so toward that, we're going to start this session with talking about what I see as two critical tools that you have for beginning that process and turning that prospectus into the beginnings of your proposal. We'll talk about, as we do that, some practical strategies for structuring and writing the capstone. And then after I go through that, which is the bulk of the content for this session, we'll talk about some additional Walden resources and supports that we have in our department and elsewhere that can be helpful for you in getting that proposal begun and working toward the final study. And if we have time, we'll stop at the end for some Q&A. Just a quick warning. I am calling in today from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, which is where I live. We are having a big thunderstorm, and so of course, right as I'm doing this. And during the earlier session today, my power flicked off a couple of times. So if for any reason you stop hearing me, I will come right back into the session as soon as I can. I do have colleagues and my managers in the background who can take over for me as well, but fingers crossed that this is going to go without a hitch and I won't lose power again. All right, so let's begin. So as I said, I see in thinking about how you move from that prospectus document into starting the proposal writing process, there are many documents and resources that are helpful in that context. So many that I think it can become overwhelming. And so my strategy in this presentation is to show you two things that I think are really key in getting that started. The two tools that I see as really instrumental are your Doctoral Capstone template. And I'll be talking about some of the mechanics of using the template more in the next session that starts at the top of the next hour. In this, I'll be talking about it a little more generally, although I will be showing you the template document. So your program's Doctoral Capstone template is the first one, and then the Capstone Checklist for your program. And there are links here for where you can access each of those things, but I'm going to go into a little more detail about how to do that, and I'll actually show you on our website and then the research office website how to get those documents. So the first item is the template. This is the document that you're actually going to be writing your proposal into. Perhaps you already are if you're at that stage of your work. You start, as I would say, as soon as possible in your writing process, start writing in the template. If you haven't been writing in the template, if you have started the process of your proposal, but you're in a different document, you want to get that material copied into the template really as soon as you can. And I'll be talking about some practical strategies for that more in the next session. The template document is going to be containing some detailed formatting instructions and the basic framework for the document itself. So it's already pre-formatted to meet Walden guidelines for margins and spacing and pagination. All of the major chapters or sections are set up, and you have the beginnings of the heading structure in most of the templates. So it really is meant to make life easier. It also has automated features for the table of contents, lists of tables and figures, and all of the headings kind of preset for you to be able to apply. So it is definitely a document that if you're not using it and you're in that writing process or you're about to, you want to make it your friend and make sure that you use that early and throughout the process. Now I'm going to go off my page here, if I can, and try to show you how you would access these from our website. And maybe we can put the link to our templates page in the chat box. I can do that as well here in a moment. But let's see. So, okay, there we go. So this is the main Doctoral Capstone Form and Style website. And Denise or someone, if you're not seeing my screen, just let me know. I'm hesitating only because I'm a little nervous about the connection, but I think we're good. So you can see this is the front page of the Doctoral Capstone Form and Style website. Our first button here is templates, so we want to go there. And then the templates are specific to the program. And so you can see you would go to the button for your program. What I'm going to demonstrate for the purposes of this presentation is PhD. So I would go into there. And you can see when you open this up, right near the top, it says PhD dissertation template. This is the template that you'll use for the proposal and the final study. It's just the same document, you just keep adding to it. And then there's other resources here as well. For PhD, if I don't know who's in this group, but if you happen to be in PhD management, that does have its own separate template that's different from the main template, and you can see links to that here and some other resources too. I just want to point out one thing because I know we're a mixed program population here, potentially. Some of the programs have an additional document that you'll want to download. I believe that's DBA, EDD, I think PhD management, and DIT have a separate instructions document. So you can see I opened up DBA here, and here we have the DBA doctoral study template. There's also a consulting capstone template for people who are doing the consulting capstone format. So there's two options for the template. And then for DBA, there's also a separate instructions document. For the programs that do that, they're trying to make the template itself simpler by having fewer instructions and bubble comments. And so they're just putting the instructions in a separate Word document. It's all basically the same information. So the PhD template that we'll be looking at more in this session has the instructions integrated into a single document, so the instructions are in comments. And I'll show you what that looks like right now. So this is the PhD dissertation template. And again, we'll talk about the mechanics of it and specifically how to use it in more detail in the next session. But you can see that there are these extensive comments on the side that you can kind of read and delete as you go through and use the document that explain how it works. And there's also explanatory text in the kind of placeholder text that appears in the document too. So in total, all of that text presents instructions that are pretty comprehensive for how to use the template document. So, okay, so let's go back to our slides. So the doctoral capstone template is item number 1 of the tools that I think are helpful as you're moving from the prospectus into the proposal. The second item is what I'm calling here the capstone checklist. I went and looked yesterday to make sure that this was true of all the programs that are current, and I believe it is. Each of the programs has a document that is called a checklist that you can access here on the ORDS Doctoral Capstone and Project Resources webpage, which brings together program documents for all of the doctoral programs. We'll jump over there for a minute so that I can show you what I mean by that. But the checklist document is really critical in starting the proposal, because what that contains is detailed guidance on the subheadings that appear within each of the main chapters or sections and the content of those sections. It has a description of what needs to be in each of those sections of your document according to your program. And this is really helpful in making sure that you cover all of the content that your faculty are going to be expecting your capstone to have. Now, some programs, when you're looking on this page for your checklist, do be aware that some of the programs like PhD and I believe EDD have separate checklists by method. So if you're doing a qualitative study, you're going to have a different checklist than if you're doing a quantitative or a mixed method study. And I will show you right now what that looks like. So let's exit out of here and go back into this screen. And thanks for your patience while I'm contending with the Zoom bar here. So this is the page from the research office. And let's see, I can copy this over into chat. Maybe to everyone. So I just copied a link over to the page that I'm at. This is a general doctoral capstone and project resources landing page for all of the programs. Now, if you're in one of the professional doctorate programs and you were looking for your checklist, you'd find your program here in the middle. So let's just say for purposes of demonstration, I won't show the checklist in detail here, but let's say you're a DPA student. So we go into DPA doctoral study, and there's a lot of information here, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. And all of these resources are really helpful in various ways in the writing process. But we're going to focus on that checklist right now, which I think is the best, in my view, starting point in terms of getting some things on paper for your proposal. So you can see there's a guidebook that's important, various process forms and so on. But that checklist document is right here. That's the DPA PAS checklist. That's the one that we will be using for this purpose. And I will jump back over to that main page, because what I'll be showing you today, though, is PhD. Now, PhD is considered separate from the professional doctorate programs. So has its document in its own areas on this page. So you'd scroll down, and its checklists are all here. You can see there's dissertation checklists, and we've got qualitative, quantitative, and mixed. For today, I'm going to show you the qualitative checklist just for demonstration purposes, but that's where you would access this. So let me go back to the slides for a moment. All right. All right, so what I'm proposing, and this is something that we go through, or at least I go through pretty frequently when I have students that I meet, in residency type contexts or intensive contexts who have finished an approved prospectus and are really struggling to get their documents started. I say it could be really helpful to get these two documents together. So, up on your laptop, on your screen, have the template open, and that's where you're going to start writing your document, and then have the checklist open. And you want to be sort of using these in concert with each other. So writing directly into the template and then looking at the checklist to see what content do I need for each of these major components. And I will open those two to kind of show you what that might look like. Because then you can start moving from the prospectus into starting the content in your template. So I believe I have everything up here that we would need. So let's take a look. Let's, just for sake of demonstration, we're looking at this as though we're doing a PhD qualitative dissertation. But this basic process is going to work for any of the programs because they all have a checklist and they all have a template. So this is what the checklist looks like for qualitative PhD. We'll see at the beginning. And this is a form, that will be used, for the purpose of making sure that you've included all the required content and then for evaluation purposes. And for the form and style editors, we don't police content in any way in our own review, but we try to support students in figuring out what their own program requirements are, and then encouraging them to take any questions they have to their chair and faculty about that content. But in terms of providing a basic outline of what the document needs to include, the checklist, I think, is very helpful and pretty crisp and clear about that. So we can see, in chapter 1, this outlines what, if you have a qualitative study, what the major headings of chapter 1 are going to be. You've got, and they're right here in this checklist document. So we've got an introduction, we've got a background section, we have the problem statement, purpose of the study, research questions, theoretical and/or conceptual framework, nature of the study, definitions, assumptions, scope and delimitations, limitations, significance, and a summary. So from looking at this checklist, I would know, okay, if I'm setting up my document, it's going to have these main headings in it, and that can be a helpful place to begin. Now the template is set up to the preferences of the department and or to the program. And so it's pretty general. It shows you what a heading looks like and tells you how to format those, but it doesn't actually include all of those headings already. So you have to add those headings to PhD. Now, I don't want to get confusing here, but some of the professional programs do have some of the headings already set up. So if you're in, say DPA, DNP, DBA, you might look and see if some of the chapters already have the headings that you need that match up with the checklist. But in a lot of cases, and in the case of PhD, you have to add those. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about how you do headings right now, because I'll be talking about that in the next session and it gets time consuming. But I will show you here just generally what you do. So, oops. So you can just write the headings right in here. I believe there's one called introduction in here. We've got background, and I'm going to format that. Open out. APA level 1. And I'm not going to put all of these in the interest of time. You kind of get the idea. So I'm looking at the checklist, looking for my main headings, and I see, okay, so the next one's problem statement. And I'm going to put that in. And I'm just setting this up, and you can do this in whatever way you'd like, but this is how I might go about this task. So I'm putting in some heading areas so I know, what I need to line up with that checklist. And then I'm putting in some placeholders. And these are tagged with body text so they don't get pulled into the table of contents, where I'll start to put my content. But let's say, and these are all tagged as APA level 1. Again, I'll talk a little bit more in the next session about the specifics of heading format. But so I know here, if I'm thinking about starting chapter 1, I want to have, I need to have a problem statement section. And if I've written a prospectus, there is somewhat brief, but I do have a problem statement in my prospectus document. So one place I can begin, if I have an approved prospectus, is by copying that text of the problem statement into the problem statement section. Now, is that going to be adequate for the problem statement section? It's quite possible that it won't have everything that you need, because the prospectus, as I think in most of the current forms, is going to be pretty concise. It's going to be quite brief in most cases. And in the actual chapter where you talk about the problem statement, that needs to be in a little more depth. So if I'm thinking, well, do I have the elements that I need in the problem statement section? One way that I can verify that is by going to that checklist. So I would go to the checklist, and there's all of this helpful information in here about how to conceive of the problem. And then it actually lists here, these are the elements I need to have in my writing in this section. I need to state the research problem, and that I can probably pull out of my prospectus. But I also need to provide evidence of consensus that the problem is current, relevant, and significant to the discipline. And then, talks about framing the problem, presenting a logical argument for addressing it as a gap in the literature, and making sure that's grounded in the discipline. Now, this is going to be specific again to your program. So you want to go to the checklist for your program. And if it's methodology specific, make sure that you have the right one for your methodology. So the items that are here, this is specific to a qualitative dissertation. For other programs, the elements might be different, but all of the programs do have a checklist document that I think are really effective in conveying this detailed information that you need to include. And that is what your faculty are going to be looking at when they evaluate your work, is have you checked all of these boxes basically in the writing that you've done. And so the prospectus provides, I think, the rudiments, the basic building blocks of some of these elements, particularly in your first chapter section, but typically you're going to have to elaborate on that and go into more depth. So that, I think, is a good place to begin with that, again, with your template and your checklist. And then you want to keep working in that template throughout the process. And to the extent possible, and I know that this can get complicated when you're exchanging work with various reviewers and faculty, to try to keep as much in the same document as you can. That can be very helpful in sort of version and revision control, so you don't lose track of all of your changes. Let me go back into full screen here. So again, this page of the slides just, again, talk about how you can use that prospectus as a beginning, but you're going to have to elaborate on those areas based on what you're seeing in the checklist for your content. And again, with any questions about proposal content, or final study content, the form and style editors really are not the most helpful for really guiding you on what specifically needs to be there. We can point you to the resources, but your chair is going to be really the best suited to answering some of those questions. So again, we'll pause for questions at the end, but I wanted to go over a few of what I see as really helpful resources and supports for this part of the process, for moving out of the prospectus and beginning to write the proposal, and moving into that capstone planning and writing process. The first thing is a set of resources that I like that we have on the Form and Style website. If you were in Tobias's last session, he was promoting these too. They're called Smart Guides, and they're just quick text-based guides to capstone formatting, writing, and organization. And we have these on a wide variety of topics, and I believe we'll be developing more in the coming months and probably years to add to this collection of materials. But they're designed to answer questions and respond to problems and challenges that students bring to us. So we have things like creating a literature review outline, practical strategies for writing the assumptions, limitations, and delimitations. There's a tool on something called reverse outlining and using that meal plan for paragraph development, which is a great structure if you haven't been introduced to it before, for making sure that you use evidence and analysis appropriately in a well-organized way in writing academic paragraphs. I would recommend bookmarking and checking out these smart guides if you haven't before, because as I said, there may be things that are really helpful to you at certain parts of the writing process. We have others that are geared toward formatting, which I'll talk a little bit more about in the next section, but just really some helpful resources there. Another resource that I like is our Capstone webinar archive. These are presentations that our staff have done previously, and they focus on issues specifically relevant to the capstone writing and formatting process at Walden. So we have ones geared toward each major component of a capstone. So there's one on introduction, conclusions, and the abstract. There's a real popular one on the literature review that I know gets a lot of views because can be a challenging part of the writing process. One about methods and design. We have webinars on APA, and there's several other topics as well if you go to our webinar archive. So that is definitely worth doing. Another thing that I know Tobias touched on too are our capstone writing kits. And when we say kit, what that really is a bringing together on our website of lots of resources and links and narrative guidance on writing particular parts of the document or particular aspects of the capstone writing process. So we have what's called a proposal kit that I think is real relevant to our concerns today, that brings together strategies, resources, and links from our department and other departments relevant to proposal writing. We have one for the final study, and we have one tailored toward multilingual writers and some of the writing issues that come with being multilingual, writing a dissertation. The final resource I wanted to highlight are our doctoral writing workshops. These are 6-week non-credit courses, and currently they're being offered free of charge. I have heard really good things about these from students, and I know that it is an excellent opportunity to receive personalized feedback on your work from an instructor and to meet students. And typically it's bringing together students from across programs, but who are writing, who are experiencing similar writing challenges and working on a similar part of their capstone. And so they're organized usually by aspect of the capstone or section of the capstone. So there's one on the proposal as a whole. There's also one on that are all people who are writing their introductory chapter section, one for the literature review, one for methods, and so forth. So that is something I would recommend looking into if you think you might like and you have the time to spend on a non-credit course that would really help to structure that process for you. I know it can really help to get people going and get motivated and get connected to other people who can be helpful in that process. I believe you register for that through your student success advisor. So I would definitely recommend bookmarking that page and checking that out if and when it becomes a relevant opportunity for you. Well, I went through that a little bit faster than I thought I would. And if that was too quick, if you have any questions about the things I presented or about anything else relevant to this general topic, I've got a good 15 minutes that I could answer that. So I have not been watching the chat box. I will go over and look, but Denise, if you've seen anything, let me know. Let's see. I'm not seeing any questions. I'm seeing an attendee saying they're in one of the CAEX courses and it's really helpful. I'm so glad to hear that. I've heard really good things, and I think because the writing process can be pretty isolating and it's
Carrie,
such a long haul thing, I think it can be great to connect. Hello?
Carrie,
Yes,
there is one student who asked if you could review the checklist in more detail. So maybe you can, with the time you've got left, you could go through that again.
sure. Yeah, I will go back and show that document. Now, if I sound a little bit hesitant about getting into too much of the checklist content, it's because we're very careful as form and style editors not to get too prescriptive about what you should be writing in your document, just because we are not the content experts in the various programs. We are, writing professionals, writing experts, formatting experts, but we just kind of guide people to this content guidance rather than really providing it. But let's go to that page first where we'd find those, because I think it is a little bit tricky to find this document. And so I wanted to point that out. So if you're in one of the professional programs, again, you would try to find your checklist using, or you would find your checklist using one of these links here, which leads to all of the program documents for the professional programs. And I'll go into one of those in a minute. We can look at one of those since we looked at PhD already. If you're in one of the PhD programs, you would go to the PhD section of this main page. Scroll down, and the checklists are under dissertation checklists. There's a little video about them embedded here. And then we have the qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods. So for PhD, you choose a method-specific checklist. All the checklists have basically the same kind of format, but the content of the checklist, like what it's telling you you need to include in each specific section, that is going to be very program specific. So you want to make sure that you go to the correct checklist for your program and possibly the kind of study you're conducting. But let's say one we haven't looked at yet. Let's look at DBA. So I'm on the DBA Capstone Studies Program Documents page. Again, this is in the Office of Research and Doctoral Services Capstone Documents website. So again, I'm looking for something that says checklist for the purposes of what I was showing today. And I see that right here, DBA Doctoral Study Checklist. There's also some old process checklists, but what we want for this purpose, I'm just seeing if there's anything else, is this DBA Doctoral Study Checklist. So I downloaded that. I'm going to open it. See, and this one's set up a little bit differently. I think, yep, but I believe this is the right one. And it indicates, so here we can see, it indicates all of the things that need to be, like if you're writing your abstract, here's all of the things that need to be covered in that abstract. These are the criteria that faculty are going to use to make sure that you have included all of the required content. If I were, say, starting section 1 of the DBA study, I could go in here and see, what are the major components of this section. And see that I need a background section within section 1. And this describes, what needs to be included in that. I need a problem and purpose section, and this describes what needs to be included there, and so forth. And that's essentially how this works. And there's, like I said, some of these will end up being specific to method or specific to the kind of study you're conducting in some way. But this is a great sort of high-level overview of all the content that you need, and a great tool for figuring out how to get started with your writing, what you can draw out of your prospectus, what you need to elaborate on, and what to include. I hope that answers the general concern, but if there's more I can go into there, I'm happy to. We've got some time. I don't know, have we seen anything else, or if there's anything else that Denise or anyone of my colleagues attending would like to add, that would be fine too. Otherwise, I can pause here and see if there's any other questions. All right, well, Denise, shall we end a little bit early on this one?
Yeah, I think that'd be okay. I'm gonna go ahead and put a link for the next session into the chat too before we close out.
Okay, well, I will let me go back to my slides for just a moment. And so if you are thinking about this later, if you have any questions particularly about our templates or anything that we covered in this session or anything else, you can contact us at editor@waldenu.edu for a response within 1 business day. And I'd encourage you to come at the top of the next hour to my session on the template, where we'll be going through some of the mechanical details of using that template and making it work for you. So thanks again for your time and attention, and I look forward to speaking to you again shortly.